Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Pan Future Society podcast. Today is Saturday, January 20th, 2018, and I guess I don't really have any jibber-jabber up at the top, so let's get right to the news of the moment. First item in the news this week, development of a new material inspired by plants that could be used in the ocean-going shipping industry. This material is inspired by the carnivorous pitcher plant and has been developed by researchers at the University of Sydney Nano Institute. The pitcher plant, for those who don't know, is a carnivorous plant, and it's kind of a long tube, and insects land near the top, and they fall in and they can't get out. Using the inspiration from this plant's materials and things that keep the bugs from getting back out, they've created a coating that has nano wrinkles 100,000 times smaller than the width of a human hair. And what this does is it prevents things from sticking to its surface. How this might be used on ship hulls. In the shipping industry, they spend hundreds of billions of dollars cleaning ships every year because algae grows on these ships, and enough of it grows that it weighs the ships down and creates more drag as they move through the water, thus increasing their fuel use. Now, there used to be a material that was painted on ships to keep the algae and whatnot from growing on them. However, it was deemed incredibly toxic to the environment and was banned in 2007. So this new material, derived from a plant source, would not have that same issue. However, it's not quite ready for prime time, doing something as large as a shipping vessel. But this is another interesting use of both a natural material being understood through nanotechnology and could perhaps be used in the shipping industry in the future. And now,
it came from outer space.
A reactor being developed by some people at the Los Alamos National Laboratory, among others, in conjunction with NASA and the U.S. Department of Energy, have developed a compact nuclear reactor that could possibly power sites in space and on Mars colonies. Now, this reactor is about the size of a coffee can, which is incredibly small, and it provides between 1 and 10 kilowatts of electric power for up to 10 years. Now, according to the article today, 10 kilowatts per day is more than enough for the average household. Of course, power use for a space colony or something might be much greater than that. But I would really like to see this kind of device more widespread. I wouldn't mind having one for my home. Certainly very small, much easier to keep it under control, and it's the kind of thing that you could use multiples of scattered about to disperse your power grid. At any rate, because of the attitude toward nuclear energy, it is very likely that we will not see these in use in your neighborhood, but rather in space and on Mars. And this would be a great way to power some deep space probes and things like that. Of course, any bit of weight added to those is a consideration whenever you're launching something. But being able to power something for 10 years with a little bit of nuclear energy is a really good way to do it. We've done it a few times before, but I would like to see its use continued greatly. And I would like to see this as definitely a likely solution for something like a Mars colony. As this article states here, the solar the amount of solar power reaching Mars can be very limited. It's much farther away, of course, and there are dust storms on Mars that can last for months. So solar power is definitely not a reliable thing over the long term on Mars. And even on the Moon, a lunar night, which occurs based on the way the Moon orbits around the Earth and all that, could last for up to 14 days. So this kind of thing definitely is a good base load source, or even maybe just a stopgap for those times when the solar power is not available. So that is NASA's kilopower system being developed by Los Alamos National Laboratories. On this week's main segment, a bit of an essay on how I think of the future, what inspires me to dream of the future, and kind of the initial spark that led me down this path. And I've talked about some of this before on the show, but this is a bit more of a in-depth look. I like to dream of the future. Often that comes through books, TV shows, and yes, video games. Sometimes it's purely an escape. There are times in my life that I don't want to be here, and I don't want to be me. I avoid entertainment like reality TV or sitcoms because I don't want to be those people either. In terms of escape, I have read just about every kind of sci-fi there is, but Arthur C. Clarke is my favorite. His books certainly have conflict, but there's rarely despair and hopelessness. His stories are often more man versus the unknown than man versus man or man versus alien. They are stories of overcoming human limitations rather than war against an enemy. Aside from that, Clarke was always as scientifically accurate as possible. So the world he builds, even 1 billion years in the future, feel believable. Sometimes they even seem like mission reports, with the characters calm in the face of danger, like the almost lackadaisical conversation that went on between Apollo 13 and Mission Control when they had their little disaster. One of the best of video games I can recommend is the Mass Effect trilogy. The design and environments are great. Sometimes you can just stand there and look at the planets and the cities and marvel. I hope someday we can have places like that. Yet one of the most memorable parts of the game is the emotional connection you make to other characters. Despite all the technology and wonder, it's the basic connections between individuals that make the struggle worthwhile. Maybe that's the lesson for us now. I'm going to post some links to things in the show notes here so you can see what I'm talking about. I've got one for Mass Effect. The first introduction to the Citadel, a city among the stars, the center of galactic trade and politics. It's quite a moment to experience. And also, as another side note, Mass Effect has an awesome music score. Star Trek is, of course, a keystone in the vision of the future I have. Gene Roddenberry very purposely created a future where equality was expected, where, at the very least, basic needs were taken care of, and great strides had been made in science and medicine. Even from the very beginning, though conflict occurred, the Enterprise's mission was one of exploration. I do have to remind myself that the bright future of Star Trek was preceded by the eugenics wars and World War III. Can we get to the future without tearing everything down? I think the earliest thing that set me on a path of futurism and wanting to push people to think long-term, especially about getting off the planet, was the show Babylon 5. Specifically this moment from Season 1, Episode 4, in 1994. In this scene, a reporter is interviewing the commander of the Babylon 5 station. The whole episode has been set up as a news crew following people around, and this comes near the end of the episode. The reporter asks, "I have to ask you the same question people back home are asking about space these days. Is it worth it? Should we just pull back, forget the whole thing as a bad idea, and take care of our own problems at home?" Commander Sinclair responds, "No, we have to stay here. And there's a simple reason why. Ask 10 different scientists about the environment, population control, genetics. You'll get 10 different answers. But there's one thing every scientist on the planet agrees on. Whether it happens in 100 years, or 1,000 years, or 1,000,000 years, eventually our sun will grow cold and go out. When that happens, it won't just take us. It'll take Marilyn Monroe and Lao Tzu and Einstein and Morobuto and Buddy Holly and Aristophanes, and all of this was for nothing unless we go to the stars." Now, the scientific accuracy aside of that moment, that is a very profound thought, and it continues to drive me and really drives the purpose of this show. And even though this moment is from a fictional show, it has as much impact for me as does Carl Sagan's famous Pale Blue Dot excerpt. In fact, I believe I watched Babylon 5 before I got around to reading Pale Blue Dot. And like the Pale Blue Dot quote, it makes me sad that more people don't have the mindset to reach these far-off goals. It's sometimes a fine balance for me, dreaming of the future, and hopefully sharing it with you so we all can dream. And on the other side, tipping into depression, thinking that what I see happening right now in the present makes any sort of future impossible. For now, I know that you, my podcast supporters, are out there, listening and dreaming too. Thank you, as always, for joining me here on the show this week. You can come to panfuture.org and see the links that I have for the show for this week, some examples of the fiction that I am sharing, and some other things like that. Some links to the news items as well, and always links to the Twitter and the Facebook feeds and the YouTube and all that stuff. And I will talk to you again in the future.
I have my obligations. To those central to me all my life. Even though this line is terminal. At least we have one more moment. Watching Earth come